Hello and welcome from me, Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchison, to this special Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us on the latest in our series of special interviews with industry leaders during the COVID-19 crisis. Our recent conversations with Virtue Motors CEO Robert Forrester, IMDA's Chairman Umish Samani, and ASE Chairman Mike Jones are also available to stream online from motortraderadio.com, Spotify and Apple and Google podcasts.
So our special guest today is Darren Edwards, CEO of Sytner, the largest dealer group in the UK. Welcome to the podcast, Darren.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. Now, while home working will be a new experience for many dealer group bosses and indeed many listeners today, you've actually had a bit of a head start following a cycling injury early in the year. So first of all, how are you? And what is a typical day for you following the lockdown?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, I came off my bike in January and fractured my hip. So I've been working from home pretty much since then, really. And so I'm quite used to it by now. I start by sort of checking social feeds, looking at the news as the sun's coming up, and then I get up just as I used to when I was still, going into the office. I try and sort of wear, business type clothes, sort of smart casual clothing, so I feel in a work mode. And then the rest of the day really is spent on Zoom, either in team meetings or with individual directors, looking at the data that's coming in, and trying to sort of steer a course depending on what we're seeing, which is varies day by day at the moment. Lots of communication with the team, it's really important, and also keeping close to our furloughed and self-isolating colleagues. So it's been a bit of a different working pattern, but very much the same. But rather than being physically engaging with everyone, it's now being sort of video and virtual, really.
The new norm for the minute, isn't it? So
new norm.
Yeah. Welcome and glad you're at least back on your feet. And
yes,
you can
off
do
crutches last
off
week
crutches.
Now, so it's been 3 long months.
So in terms of Sytner's, and could you take us through some of the sort of the planning in sort of Sytner's response to the initial lockdown and obviously what's happening in the aftermath, particularly thinking about that workshop and after sales market?
Sure. Well, I think the announcement to close schools was made around about the 17th of March, and then from the next morning, really, our sales dropped by about 50%. And I think from speaking to other dealer group, leaders and managers, I think that was a similar picture. And then on the Friday, I think the 20th, when they announced that bars and restaurants were told to close, we kind of guessed that shops and retailers would be next. And that was certainly the experience based on our Italian dealerships, who are about 2 weeks ahead of us. So we announced on the Monday, to lunchtime, that to all our colleagues and also to our customers that we're going to close the showrooms on the Tuesday night. So we started to work towards that. But then watching the news that night, I sort of spat out my glass of wine as the government said that, all retailers were to be shut that night. So, we had to quickly adapt our plans, and then we worked through the night. So by about midnight, we'd written to just under 1 million customers and about 10,000 colleagues, telling them, not to visit the showrooms the following day, and then went to bed quite tired. But then, when I woke up the next day, we were told that, the guidance had changed and that garages could stay open. So, we'd sent a text to everybody the night before saying, don't come in. So we had to quickly change our view on that. But that was fine because we'd always planned to have just a few workshops open. We've got 30 workshops open now supporting key workers strategically placed around the country. So that kind of went okay. Some colleagues were, pretty confused in the morning. They were a little scared because, 1 minute I'm telling them not to come in and the next minute we're saying you can come in. But now they've settled into a good groove looking after key workers, and the team, I think they feel pretty proud of the work they're doing, seeing lots of stuff posted in our internal Yammer feeds and social media. So it was, it was quite frantic, but now I think we're in a pretty good place.
Now, Darren, with workshops, I mean, you've just said that you've got 30 key workshops open, looking after NHS staff, key workers, emergency services. Can you take us through the importance of maintaining online new and used car activities during the lockdown?
Yes, I mean, we've been in a bit of a dilemma because I think firstly, we feel it's vitally important as a company to adhere to the government's stay home instructions. So, we're not allowing any deliveries to take place at the moment. The first day or so, there was a bit like, the embassy shutting down and everyone trying to jump on the helicopter. It was a few people trying to get their cars out. So that happened. But now we're fully locked down. But as a business, we thrive on innovation. So we've now launched our buy online process on our website. We've introduced a home-based telesales team by division to deal with any inquiries. And we probably launched that slightly earlier than we'd planned. We had planned to launch that in the summer, so we brought that forward. So it's had a few glitches. I think at one point we offered a Bentley for sale for nothing, free of charge. So that was quite fun. But the IT and marketing teams have worked through the night over the last few days, and they've ironed that out. And it's actually now pretty slick. But what we haven't done yet is pushed it any hard in terms of marketing. We just don't feel the time is right to do that. It would send the wrong message. But we are having plenty of what I would call natural visits, and we've now sold over 140 cars this month, which 1 week in, it's about 10% of what we'd normally do. But it's a start, and I think once we can start confirming delivery dates, then I expect that to become a bigger share of what we're doing. So I think it's really important that we sort of learn from this, and I think the longer the lockdown lasts, the more we will learn, and then we can adapt to whatever consumer demand looks like, once we're on the other side of all this, really. So I think it's been really important to sort of put the toe in the water and see how it works.
And this is a mixture of new and used cars, is it?
Mainly used. We are taking new inquiries through the website and into the telesales teams, all based at home, all using Zoom, all connected. But the online sales is purely for used at the moment, and that's on the Sytner website rather than the manufacturer's website, because we do online sales with JLR and with BMW as well. So mainly for us, it's mainly been the looking at used cars.
Yes,
and it's going to be interesting in terms of this is the third week now that and there's a feeling that we were talking before the show that it's becoming a bit of a norm. It isn't a norm because we're not in a normal environment at the minute, but the initial lockdown, then there was trying to get the head around the furloughing and things like that, and then there seems to be a bit of a settling now as we head towards the sort of bank holiday weekend in terms of that consumer market, and you just wonder whether activity online will start to stabilize, if not start to increase, as people sort of start to sit down and get on the computers and start to do a bit of research and look for things possibly.
Yeah, it's good. We're 10% of sales at the moment, with 130 showrooms completely closed and just people working from home. So as we start to get more inquiries, we can unfurlough team members, we can put them working. They don't have to come into work, they just start working on their phone and engaging with people on the internet and by email and live chat, etc. So that 10% could become 20, could become 30 quite quickly, I think.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how it develops.
And in terms of the franchise sector, what would you say is the mood of the sector at the minute? And I presume, are you talking to other sort of sector leaders and group heads across the market? What are you hearing from the OEMs as well? Because it's there's a lot going on, and everybody's in it together at the minute, aren't they? It's a slightly different market.
Yeah, I think the collaboration actually has been fantastic. I've been talking to my colleagues that do the same kind of job as me at the other dealer groups, probably at least twice a week, sometimes daily, sometimes more than once a day. And at first we were all trying to work out what was appropriate with regards to sort of car deliveries and workshop openings, and taking guidance from the government and OEMs and trying to find the balance. And I think we've probably done that now. Everyone's decided what they're going to do in terms of their approach. And then it was, as you mentioned, trying to understand the details of the job retention scheme, and and then there was a bit of lobbying about the trying to get commissions incorporated in terms of the calculation. and that was great. And I must say, I think the NFDA played a big part in making that happen, and also the IMDA as well, and all the estate agent trade bodies. They all helped. So I think lots and lots of communication between the franchise networks, and then from the manufacturers. Some I think now trying to work out what is appropriate in terms of timing new car deliveries. But I think in the first few days, it worked really, really hard to introduce all these kind of extraordinary measures we've seen to ensure that their networks stay liquid, advancing bonus funds and extending floor plan and, making it free of charge, and just really trying to do everything they could to try and keep us liquid. And I think I've been really, personally been really pleased by their approach. And I think that's why, for me, the franchise model, I know we've got our used car business, but the franchise model is still very attractive, because when the chips are down, they do have your back. And I really can't fault any of them for their support levels so far. So yeah, it's very fast moving and lots of decisions need to be made. But I was really pleased with how the network and the dealer groups generally collaborated. It's been great to see actually the camaraderie between all of us.
In fact, Darren, a couple of weeks ago, Robert Forrester was on the podcast, and he told us about a WhatsApp group that had been started up by one of the OEMs and had been jumped on by all the dealer group bosses who are using it as a way to keep in touch with each other. I mean, is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I was part of that group as well, and made my comments on there. And clearly, you've got to be a bit careful, competition law and everything. But ultimately, we were in a unique situation, and all just trying to find out the best way to move forward, really. And so I think it was, that kind of collaboration, and as I say, the camaraderie has been excellent, and the level of expertise and knowledge that we all have that we can share just means that we've been able to adapt to this situation quicker than if you just felt isolated. So I think it's been great, actually, really, really good.
Yeah. Now, Sytner is pretty much unique in the franchise sector, as you own and operate a large network of car supermarkets. So can you tell us how the car shop lockdown has gone? And are you seeing a rise in online visits since the lockdown to car shop?
Yeah, I think, it's been quite interesting. I mean, firstly, on the lockdown side of things, we managed it as a team of 3 entities, really, because we had, the Sytner Group based on obviously Great Britain, and then we have Northern Ireland with Ag News, and then we have the car shop business. So, using Zoom, we were able to communicate across all 3 companies. So the process for locking down was identical for each company. So it went very, very smooth. Business levels obviously impacted similar to the franchise business, really, down by about 90%. But again, we've got a telesales team in place. They're not quite online yet. They're probably earlier than we were in terms of their process, in terms of reservations online and finance acceptance. But you can't actually do the full transaction yet, whereas you can on the Sytner website. But they are, at the moment, building an order bank, ready for when we can start deliveries again. Their after sales business is actually very small, unlike our franchise business, where half the GP we produce is through after sales. For theirs, it's a small percentage. So none of the workshops are open, but they are taking future bookings. So again, it's just about building that order bank ready for when we can open the doors.
So in terms of the used car market and recently Cap HPI, because there's always this question around what will happen. We're not in a 2008 2009 where there is supply but no demand, and everything's shut down. So we're in a unique place at the minute, which is, as you've just been saying there about the collaboration and everything that's going on, which we are in a new unique market. But in terms of, were you encouraged initially by Cap HPI's, probably people are saying, a pragmatic view to freeze use valuations as sort of volumes of data started to slow down and initially stop entirely? And what do you think the implications are for the group? Because obviously we've got a recovery side of this as well, haven't we? We've got the lockdown, and then obviously when we start to come out of it, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the freeze was very welcome. It made no sense to me to move prices down when there just aren't any transactions being made. I think it would be both unfair to dealers and also to customers. I think because we're in this limbo at the moment. I mean, for us, we've got over 20,000 used cars in stock right now, over £400 million invested. Just a 1% drop on that when you're not actually selling anything is quite a big chunk of of profit to take if that's what would have been the case, for instance. So no, I think it was definitely the right thing to do. I think everybody feels that it was the correct thing to do. Obviously, once we come out of lockdown, we'll have to see what level of the demand is and react accordingly. And and that will generate the transactions that you can then measure the pricing on, and obviously then the cap HPI will set the values accordingly. But I think for now, holding them steady was definitely the right thing to do, and it just gives everyone a bit of breathing space to manage the rest of the business without worrying about stock devaluing. So it was very welcome.
Now, Sytner is part of a global group that operates across North America and continental Europe as well as the UK. So are there any experiences and best practices that the UK has been able to share as being part of the Penske group?
Yes, I mean, it's, well, as you can imagine, Roger Penske at the moment, I mean, we've been talking daily about what's happening across the globe, particularly in the US, where they have the kind of largest part of their business. But it's the European businesses that we have, particularly Northern Ireland, that encountered the virus first, really, because as we know, that was the first hotspot in Europe. And we've got a business out there called the Autovanti dealer group, and it's kind of like a mini Sytner with the same brand. It's got about 20 dealerships based in kind of Bologna, Milan. So right in the hotspot, really. So they started to put all the social distancing measures in place 2 or 3 weeks before we had to. And then they went into lockdown a couple of weeks before we did. So it's been really helpful to talk to the team there and understand the actions that they had taken in terms of, the social distancing and hygiene. So that when I could see this coming, really, it just gave me a bit of a head start. So we were able to introduce pretty early on things like hygiene measures, working from home. So we hadn't actually been affected by anyone at that point with having the virus. In the US, we've got about half of our dealerships closed compared to all of them in Europe and the UK, mainly on the east and the west coasts. But I think the other aspect that's been really interesting to talk to Roger about is the motor racing side, because he now owns the IndyCar Championship. He bought that beginning of the year, and that includes the Indianapolis Speedway, which holds in May every year the Indy 500, which is probably one of the biggest races in the world. It's got 300,000 people attending, so all that's had to be arranged, and it's been pushed out now, I think, until August. The season hasn't started yet, just like F1. So, this huge company has had so many different things to have to think about. It's been incredible, really. But yeah, you take it one day at a time and try and learn and adapt as best as you can. But it's been fascinating.
So in terms of the new car market, we've touched on it before about obviously the lockdown, and obviously the March results have come out and 44.4% down, and obviously at the same time as SMMT published the March results, they also published their reforecast of a 23% drop in the full year forecast down to 1.7 million, and obviously it's challenging for them to forecast out because they actually don't know when we're going to come out of this restriction, etc. But how big a challenge has this been? Because I mean, out of all the months, there's two ways of looking at it. Possibly is that that if it had been if we'd had this lockdown in February, you'd have risked losing all of March. We managed to get some of March, but obviously only half of it, essentially. So what's how big a challenge will it be to when we start to return to the market? Because obviously there's going to be an element of customers waiting for the cars that they couldn't get and hand over, etc. What's your thoughts around that?
Well, I think it's going to be whatever day we get told we can open. The next couple of weeks are going to be extremely busy. I mean, from a Sytner Group point of view, we've got several thousand cars which were destined to go out in that last week of March, which couldn't go out. I expect that's probably the same for a lot of groups. Clearly, that 44% kind of lends itself to that argument, doesn't it? Because if you think about the March market, normally it's very much weighted towards the last few weeks as the manufacturers push the last few cars through, and then we're all trying to get them to customers. So the fact that the kind of the shutters came down, a week or so to go, means that there's going to be a huge amount of build up of cars having to go out the door. So I think that's that's going to be inevitable. I mean, up until that point, I have to say that March was looking very strong. It was a really solid month. For us, we were ahead of prior year. But I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, at the moment, you could push if you wanted to, I suppose, for home deliveries. But as a business, we're not doing it at the moment. We're adhering to the kind of stay home, protect the NHS, save lives messaging. Even though we are getting lots of customers asking us to deliver cars, we're just kind of being patient. But I think most of our team now are furloughed anyway. I think we've got about 92-93% at home. But as soon as we get the all clear to start retailing again, we're going to be very busy. And then we don't know what yet the kind of level of demand is going to look like, particularly for new cars. So it's going to be interesting to see what that develops like over the next few months. We just don't know what consumer confidence is going to like and how much disposable income they have. So I think for the other parts of the business, after sales and used cars, there isn't really a reason why they both shouldn't hold up fairly well. One is largely based on need, and the other one can be stimulated, whether by choice or by pricing. So I think as a group, we're going to be working hard to try and make sure we're best placed to capitalise on that once the time is right. But at the moment, it's just about being patient and waiting to the point that we can go for it again.
So finally, Darren, what do you think will be some of the long-term impacts on the car retailing sector once we emerge from the lockdown?
Well, I think there's quite a few people commenting on this at the moment. I think it's probably too early to say for definite, but you could certainly understand if customers want less contact and more of a transaction carried out online for both sales and after sales. I think so. Online checking for service and online sales for cars. You can see that certainly coming to the fore. Having a more digitally focused home-based sales team. And contact centres working from home, that's something that we've managed to incorporate. That could be a new feature of business going forward. And I think also the in dealership process is going to change. Hygiene methods and social distancing, they're all going to have to be put in place to try and reduce the number of physical touch points. So I think there's a fair few things that are going to change. And I think the other thing that we were speaking before we started to record this was that we don't know yet what the attitudes are going to be towards home working and also commuting. But if remote working does take hold permanently, then this could actually reduce the need for transportation generally. Be it cars, planes, buses, or trains. If people do decide actually that commuting is something that they'd rather not have to do anymore. So it's going to be fascinating to see. I think China is it will be a good barometer. They're a few months ahead of us. They're coming out of lockdown now, aren't they? So it'll be interesting to see the trends that develop there and see if they're going to resonate with our market. But I think after the last big crash we saw in 2008-9, the sector saw then many years of steady growth, really up until the diesel crisis. But the way we sold cars now hasn't really changed. Whereas I think this time there will be some level of change. It's kind of inevitable because of the way that we've all had to adapt. So I think any business that can manage to adapt to the new way of thinking will thrive and continue to be successful. But we'll just have to make sure we can do that, and then whatever the challenges are, meet them and address them, and then tackle them and respond and become a better and even more agile business as we go forward. I think that's all we can really plan to do at the moment, is just keep on watching and be the best we can be once the time is right.
No, and you're right. I think it's good. There's going to be a new norm in the behaviours are going to change somewhere, not just the automotive sector, but generally that sort of consumer behaviours will change, and business behaviours will change as well, won't they? So I think you're right. I think this is going to have a profound impact, like nothing like what 2008 had. This is going to change the way people interact and operate their businesses and buy essentially long term into it. So it's definitely going to be a different one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2008 people just sort of dusted themselves off once they got going again, and off we went. Whereas this, it's inevitable. There's going to be change. To what level we don't know, but certainly home working, online, distancing, hygiene, all these things, and particularly until we get a vaccine as well. I think that's going to be the key, isn't it? Until we get a vaccine in place, a lot of the practices that we see now are going to continue for some time, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it's been a pleasure. I mean, it's been a long time getting you on, and I think we're glad that you're back on your feet, and at least you're resting, and it keeps you away from being busy out on the road and on your bike again. But at least you can rest and put your feet up, and during this period after your recovery.
Feet up. I don't know about resting, but
it's quite draining being on conference calls and webinars and the computer all day, isn't it? Actually, people are starting to think it's quite draining. They're longing for an hour's commute in a car or a train, aren't they, at the minute, I think?
Yeah, I mean, when I could drive again for about a week, I went to visit 2 dealerships and I loved it, and then suddenly I'm back home again. So it's been I've gone a bit stir crazy, but at least the weather's getting better now. So that's something to look forward to. But no, it's been a pleasure, and it was far too long being too busy to come on, but it was a pleasure talking to you guys, and I hope you found it interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for joining us, Darren.
Definitely. So, I mean, it leaves me to say, well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing the insight with our listeners. And we obviously wish you and the team of Sytner all the best in these obviously different and challenging times, and as the word is, unprecedented times that we find ourselves in. But you've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio special podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. So please like and share through the social media channels, as it's important to, as Darren has said, that collaboration and sharing insight and knowledge is important more than ever these days, particularly across the dealer sector, and obviously come together with experience. So that's all from Curtis and I today. We'll be back with the industry headlines on Saturday as normal, but obviously watch out for the special podcast and interviews with industry leaders and specialists across the sector as we work through this crisis. So thanks for listening, and please stay safe, everybody.